Okay, great. Well, welcome to week 4 of Theology 2 here at Midwestern. Just wanted to encourage you guys. Great work thus far on both the discussion boards and the quizzes. Really appreciate the effort and the energy you guys are putting into getting these assignments in on time and working hard on those. Please remember that I'm trying to give you comments every week. So the past couple weeks I've, in both your quiz grades and your discussion boards, giving you feedback. And so in the quizzes I'm getting just written feedback via the comment section. But please note on your discussion boards I'm giving you voice memos so you can hear kind of my thoughts about what you're writing and what you're doing. Not only the interactions you're having, but the content and the positions you're taking. I'm trying to give some thoughts and some critique on that. So if you've not made use of those or listened to those, please make sure you're doing that for ways that you can improve. I tried to do this the week previous, and so I'm going to talk about the atonement. I know you're finishing up a week right now on the gifts and things related to pneumatology, but I just want to talk a little bit more about the atonement, because that's just what the week I came off of grading and giving you feedback on. Again, I would just strongly encourage all of you to do good exegesis before you bring in kind of a doctrinal formulation on something. Many of what you guys are doing is very sound theology. It's very orthodox in your conclusion, but the method and how you're getting there, a lot of you are not grounding that in good historical, grammatical kind of hermeneutic method. And historical, grammatical meaning the historical, cultural context, and you're actually looking at the grammar, that is the original languages, the vocabulary, the syntax, the grammar and structure of what's happening in those verses to get at the authorial intention that was inspired. So make sure you're working hard. I made a lot of comments to that effect throughout the week as I was grading your work, but please continue to strive for that. Another resource I would recommend to all of you would be a book by my friend, Gary Schultz, as a pastor at First Baptist Fulton, who's written the book, A Multi-Intentioned View of the Extent of the Atonement. Many of what you wrote was based on a principle that you thought the atonement accomplished something, that it had already accomplished the salvation that believers are going to enjoy. And many of you tied that to a doctrine of election and a soteriological kind of system, an order of salvation in which salvation wasn't a possibility, it was an accomplished fact. And so a lot of what that was based upon is a kind of singular view of the atonement. What Gary's going to argue in his book, and I'd commend it to all of you for further reading, is a more multi-layered extent of the atonement or intention to the atonement. The atonement, yes, was to accomplish salvation for believers, but was also to die for the sins of the whole world. So I'd commend that book to you as just maybe a different spin on how to look at some of those things. A couple other just reminders this week. Remember, your midterm is due this upcoming Sunday night. So a week from today by 11:59 p.m., your Theology 2 midterm is due. Now remember that you can find a study guide in the module section on the course for this Theology 2 midterm. Under discussion boards, there's also a discussion board for Theology 2 midterm. I'll try to check that periodically throughout the week if some of you have questions. Remember that the quickest way to get me if you have questions is to just email me, and I'll try to respond to those as quickly as I can. Please also note, this is not an open book quiz, open book midterm. Your quizzes are open book, but your midterm is not. And so you really need to study hard this week to be able to articulate and interact with the material that you've covered. You've covered some very important doctrines related to Christ and the Holy Spirit. You need to be ready to interact with those two realities. Finally, remember, as far as it relates to your midterm, that your proctor does not need to be a family member. We want you to have some accountability, and frankly, it's just far too easy sometimes to cut corners. And so we really want to have somebody that's a pastor in your church or a leader that you trust that would be able to hold you accountable to the standards that we're setting for you. I will be spot checking the proctors that you list for as far as their contact information goes to make sure that you are working on that. One quick strategy for the test: make sure if there have been comments I've made about your content on the quizzes and or discussion boards, related to the content for the midterm, you need to make sure you shore that up. So many of you, when you were talking about, for example, the atonement and Hugo Grotis's position on the atonement, many of you were unclear about some of the nuances of his position, and I clarified that. I kind of pushed back and gave you a critique in your quiz. That would be a good example of something that you really want to hone in on for the midterm. So look back through those quizzes, look at the discussion boards, make sure you shore that up, and then look at the study guide that's there in your material there on Canvas. Finally, your second phase for the contextualized application project is due this coming Sunday night as well. So not today, but obviously next Sunday is when it's due. That's the 8th. We're asking you to give us a thesis and a detailed outline. Now, in the syllabus, you have an example of a good thesis. What you're doing is arguing for the conclusion you're going to draw. So you'll say something like, this paper will defend for example, a premillennial view of the return of Christ, or this paper is going to argue for regenerate church membership or baptism as a requirement for membership. One of the things that I've already started to encourage many of you to do is to focus your topic a bit. Because this paper is only 10 to 15 pages, you really need to narrow it down so that you can actually defend and argue for the thesis with the scope that you have to work with in a 10-page paper. So make sure, if you need help on that, feel free to email me this week. I'd be glad to interact and help you in any way that I can. But this Sunday, not only do you need to have your thesis in, but the syllabus encourages you to have a detailed outline. Now, by detailed outline, I mean that you're going beyond just the thesis statement and just a summary 10,000-foot view of some of the points you're going to make. You need to get more detailed into the kind of the weeds on what each of those what the outline is going to look like for your project. So for those of you writing a sermon, you need to go so far this week as to identify the key texts that you're going to be preaching from, the main idea, some of the main points, even down to the points of application that you're going to try to drive at. If you're writing an academic paper, you need to outline your points and major arguments that you're going to make and the support that you're going to offer. If you're writing a lesson plan, for a group of teenagers or for a youth ministry or for an educational setting and an adult setting for a church, you need to make sure you're identifying the major lessons that you're going to cover through that project as well. One of the things to remember is that the syllabus is clear. No matter what track you choose, it's a minimum of 10, maximum of 15 pages for the contextualized application project. So I've had people write sermons before that are only 5 or 6 pages, and they get a very low grade on this project because they don't read the syllabus carefully. So if your manuscript for your sermon is only 5 or 6 pages, you need to plan on writing a sermon series in which you're writing a couple sermons or 2 or 3 sermons that fulfill the length requirements. Same thing goes for lesson plans. Your lesson plan needs to be minimum 10 pages, 20 credible sources, okay? If you're writing the sermon, we don't expect the sources to show up as directly as it would in an academic paper, for example, in footnotes, but those sources need to show up in the content and what you're presenting to show that you've been well prepared and well studied for those things. So if you have questions about the midterm or phase 2, feel free to let me know, but I'm thankful for the hard work you guys are putting in. Please let me know if you have any questions and look forward to grading your work and interacting with you guys this upcoming week.